Right, okay, I play a character called Eleanor Guthrie. She's a very determined young woman, and her role is the fence. So she takes in pirate goods and sells them back to merchant ships. So for that reason, she becomes the main kind of economic and political power of the island. She's someone that the pirates have to kind of constantly pander to and vie for her favour, and so it's an incredible character to play, and she is just a very strong, determined young woman who wants to make this island a more civilised and real society that functions within commercial parameters and is a commercial success.
And I play Captain Flint, who's the captain of the Walrus. When we join him, historically he's been the most successful pirate on the island. He's brought in the most money, but he's hit a fallow patch, and his crew is becoming discontented and beginning to doubt his captaincy. And there's a guy on the crew who is trying to get him kicked out and voted, because these crews were democracies. They'd all been pressed, the crews of pirate ships had all been pressed onto naval ships or onto merchant ships. They were taken away from their families, they were treated appallingly, they were paid very little. It was a very hard life. So when they became pirates, they imposed this real democratic system, which was terribly inefficient, because every time there was a decision to be made, they all kind of had to go and have a show of hands. The only time a captain had absolute power was in battle. So anyway, there's a sense at the beginning of this that Flint is this terrifying figure, but he's on the back foot. He's in trouble. They're going to vote him off, and he has to survive.
So I know, like John we were talking about, Treasure Island, the original book, and how Flint is all over it, his influences there, but we really don't see Flint. And this is the first time, at least for myself, that I've seen the Flint, or seen a treatment of the Flint character.
Yeah.
For you, was it a blank canvas, or did you go back to the original source material, or?
I read Treasure Island, but it wasn't really much help. The only things that are really in there is that he was this terrifying figure, that the treasure on Treasure Island is his, he's dead. He went to the island with 10 crew members and he came back alive. So we know this about him, and that he still has this hold on these characters at the beginning of Treasure Island, with Billy Bones, Blind Man Pew, and all those. They all have, they're all sort of generated from Flint's power. So, but really there was a blank canvas, and it was more John that really he went back, just wanted to paint something totally, credible and much more complex than I think comes across in the book. It's like this is a prequel, but there's so much more that we can do to tell the story. We know that we connect up with it there, but there's so much in between that we can and so much fun that we can have, and also, John was saying, Treasure Island is a kind of children's campfire story. We want to tell something that's much more complex and adult.
What is it about Treasure Island which you think has made such an archetypal story down the centuries? Why do you think,
I think piracy is something that has a very strong connection with people. I think piracy is the prequel to the Western. These guys are outside the norms of society. They are freebooters. They do what they want. They live by their own rules. I think there's something very appealing, especially in the male psyche, about them. And that there is this feeling that they are, there's a kind of combination of all kinds of things in there, like the man with no name, walking into town, with they're bad, they're good, we're not quite sure whether we side with them or we don't side with them. There's a lot of parity with that, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's a perennial. The thing is that it hasn't been dealt with in this way. I think Westerns, they've gone back and they've done Westerns where they've got to strip back a lot of the mythology, and they've done these gritty kind of, but they haven't done it with piracy. And I think that's, it's right for doing it. It just lends it so much more, it lends it so much more complexity and kind of a real texture. That's what it would have been like
I mean, I think as well. I mean, piracy has kind of been kind of fantasized and mythologized in people's minds because of the kind of terror it inspires. I think in some ways people go to the fantasy side in order to create some kind of light relief. But this show, in lots of ways, is intertwining so many historical facts and finding a kind of truth in all of kind of piracy genre. And I think that, you know, we have an incredible team around us who are kind of managing to weave it together in a way that you're making a show where you have real human characters who are engaging, gripping, and you want to know if they're going to survive or not. And I think in that way, these stories, as Toby was saying, it is a Western. It has that kind of idea of trailblazing. And, you know, it's such an important historical time. It's, you know, the beginning of kind of capitalism as we know it today. And the way in which, you know, all of those storylines do relate to aspects of our lives today. And the show does it in a really intelligent and non-patronising way. And I think that TV audiences now are far more, you know, are far more informed and want to be informed by the television they watch. And I think that this show is really kind of pitching it at that level and making sure that, you know, that the information that we're giving over is engaging and real.
I mean, because there's still piracy today, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been historically, it's been there from, you know, day one. As soon as people started, you know, taking merchandise on the sea, there was pirates.
Yeah.
So, you know, and in fact, the heyday of what we're talking about, the piracy in the Caribbean, it happened over about 6 years before the British just stomped on it. Because you know, it was one of those things. At first, it was working in Britain's interest to have, you know, as long as they were raiding French and Spanish ships, hey, we don't mind, you know, go ahead. And then when they started affecting British trade to the Americas, then it was a problem, and then they had to go down there and stomp on it. And so really what we're talking about is a 5-year period where it really, you know, these people flourished, and then it ended, and we know that it ended, and it's you know, that's a great start for a piece as well, because, you know, it's a finite, you know, we know that you know, we know that Flint dies, but I mean, how does he get there and what happens? So it's a tragedy as well as
When you guys ended the filming the first season, you didn't know there was a second season now, but you didn't know there was a second season. Does the finale have a finite end to it, or will it have a cliffhanger?
I mean, it is a cliffhanger, but you could look at it. It does have a sort of, you know, it does have some sort of. Well, actually, it is a cliffhanger.
It's a massive
But it's satisfying in itself.
It's satisfying in itself, but it will lead.
You'd be going, I want to watch what comes next. I really do. I want to know how they get out of this.
I know. I mean, I've been lucky enough to see the end sequences, and I kind of like, and now not having any of the scripts for season 2, I'm just chomping at the bit. I'm like, when are we going to get these scripts through now?
When do you go back to work?
And we go back we travel to Cape Town on the 8th of November, and then we'll be in training for a couple of weeks, and then we start shooting on 20 something of November. So it's a short time. I mean, it's kind of flying by, and I think, you know, January is very quickly coming upon us, and it's going to be amazing. I think one of the amazing things as well about shooting a show where it hasn't aired is that you kind of you are in this kind of bubble of the storyline, and you don't have to be kind of affected by, you know, audience reactions in some ways, which is interesting because it gives a sense of longevity to the storylines. You don't kind of influenced by, oh no, because next week somebody wants to see this happen, and I think that's a real kind of freedom, and it's something we're very lucky to be given by, you know, by a cable format and by Starz, who are incredibly like supportive, and I'm sure John has been, you know, writing lyrical about the fact that they have kind of given a lot of freedom as regards to the way in which the story runs, and John's such a mastermind with it all, you know. So there's no one who's kind of the authority on this other than our writers, and I think that's a great situation to be in.